How's it going, everybody, and welcome back to another video. This time I want to take a break from the comics to kind of talk about something that I've been seeing pop up here and there, and I like to keep this as much about the books, not about value, not about money as I can, and just a passion for the hobby. And it is all going to loop together and tie in. So today, a lot of the books I've been showing you guys, though, have been books that I've discovered through movies or shows and not as much comics that I grew up reading as a kid. So I want to delve into that on kind of the great topic I see a lot of people talking about on should the movies and shows affect comics, comic value, comic pricing. And as much as it's going to be kind of a cop-out, and I'll explain why, the answer is yes when it's good, no when it's bad. And I'm going to start with the bad right away, just to get it out. I don't like taking a while to get to my point. And that if you liked a comic or a character before a movie or show came out, if that then, like, let's say you were a hardcore Eternals fan. Great example, because as many of you know, that movie was not very well received. I myself, I thought it was a good movie. I didn't think it was a great movie. And the way I kind of judge it is that even if I didn't hate it when I watched it, I've never felt the need to go back and rewatch that movie, which is how I judge a lot of movies after the fact. If I want to go back and relive those moments and it really stuck with me, that's how I know I had myself a winner. But so let's say you were a hardcore Eternals fan before that movie came out. The movie comes out, it bombs, it tanks, and now that comic is worthless to so many people. If you were a hardcore fan, is that going to change how you felt about it? Those characters, the books you have, the books you loved, the one you have in your collection? It absolutely should not. And I completely get that when movies and shows are coming out, people like to speculate. You have some people that want to get in and flip it. So buy the rumor, sell the news. They get in as soon as they can so that hopefully, if a character is confirmed or a movie is confirmed, that price shoots way up. They sell the books, cash out, they win. Then you have people like when I first started getting into the hobby, I started doing, which is I really love everything Marvel has done phase 1 through 3. I could have died a very happy man if I just lived long enough to see Avengers Endgame. It's like my entire life from Iron Man 1 had been culminating to this moment. That was all I cared about. What Robert Downey Jr. in particular was able to do with Iron Man, this was a character that when I was growing up, I'd seen action figures, I'd seen toys, I knew of Iron Man, but I had no idea who he was. And then Iron Man 1, Iron Man 2 came out, blew up. That was 2008, and like I said, I was born in 1993. So for me, it was absolutely the coolest superhero movie I'd ever seen. That and Edward Norton's Hulk back to back. I thought that was the greatest thing when I was a kid. They took this relatively obscure character, for me at the time, and while I wasn't as deep in the comic world, I want to think that he wasn't as mainstream as he is now, that's for sure. So how many kids, how many adults, how many people in general do you have that are now Iron Man fans specifically because of that movie and what the Marvel Universe has been able to do? Just because I haven't particularly liked what the last phase has done, I mean, it's not like he was heavily involved, but that means that I'm not going to all of a sudden start hating Iron Man. I love that character and I'm going to keep loving that character. One bad movie isn't going to change it. So, in terms of should they affect the value of comics when things go bad? No, they should not. I wish so much that I was able to go back and get Iron Man's first appearance. I don't know how inexpensive it was when those movies were first coming out compared to now. Even if they cost a pretty penny, I'm sure they are significantly more expensive now, where I wish I could have gone back in time and got that book before it blew up. And so that's kind of what the other half of people are doing right now, with movies and shows and characters that might be used. Even if they're not buying the books to flip and make a profit, when I first got in the hobby, that's what I was doing on the other side. I would buy a book because I was afraid it was going to be a great character and it was going to blow up and take off and then I wouldn't be able to get that book later. So even though I wasn't on the flipping side of it, my mentality was still the same. There was still that same FOMO because I was like, man, Iron Man, if I could go back in time, I would love to have his first appearance. Don't know if I'm ever going to have it now. So if I can just get ahead of whatever that next big character is that's gonna really mean something to me, I'm gonna do it. And so I lost a lot of money when I first even really got into the hobby since I was a kid. Because I was trying to get ahead of those first appearances and I was buying into the FOMO like everybody else was. Now, in terms of the good side, when the movies and shows are good, I think those should 100% affect the comic value and price. I have mentioned to you guys numerous times that I grew up, and when I was very, very small, just noticed that the sun's coming through that window just right, so we're just gonna shift over here. When I was very, very small, I was obviously, as I've pointed out many times, a hardcore Spider-Man fan, which, as soon as this video is over, I'm gonna have to shut that window so we don't get light on these bad boys, and Batman and Incredible Hulk. Now, I didn't grow up reading comic books like a lot of you guys. I have memories, like I've told you, of me being younger. I would go down to the comic shop, I would pick out Spider-Man comics, any that I could afford, and I was kind of reading them out of order. I would mostly buy them by a cover, even when I was a kid. Anything that was old, anything that was cool, anything Carnage, anything Venom, and I would just buy that one issue that I could read. But even back then, I wasn't picking up comics every week. I wasn't into comics in terms of I was reading a set run, I had to get that set run. So even though I had my Spider-Man comics growing up, everything I loved about all superheroes was from movies, shows, and video games. I have always loved Batman ever since I was a kid as well, but I did not read Batman comics, especially not religiously, until Scott Snyder and Greg Capullo's run in 2011, and I didn't even start reading that until they were into their 0-year arc. When I did get into it, those were the books that got me into picking up comics every week. And that sent me down the rabbit hole of I was picking up Batman, Detective Comics. I started reading Godzilla again. So I had got onto that track of my first local comic book store. I had a pull box, and all of that was because of Scott Snyder and Greg Capullo's run on Batman. Before that, though, only thing with Batman, I grew up watching Michael Keaton, that original 1989 Batman, like I'm sure many of you did. I loved Batman Begins, I loved The Dark Knight, Dark Knight Rises, and then at the time, I remember very distinctly, one time I went over to my sister's house, and she had on and was playing this game I'd never seen before, and that was Batman Arkham Asylum from Rocksteady Studios. I sat down and I watched her play that game, and I became enthralled. The detail, the mythology, the characters they used. At that point, there were a lot of characters in these games that I'd never even heard of. Flash forward to Batman Arkham City, the sequel. When Hush popped up in that game, I had no idea who he was. So that kind of gives you guys an idea of what level I was on. It wasn't until, I picked up Spider-Man quite a bit more, but most of what you guys have seen from my comics and everything I have enjoyed, like I said, at least 2011, and even then it was mostly just a lot of my raw comics. A lot of these slabbed and everything, that's only been for the past, sadly, since the comic boom. So I haven't been shafted on a lot of them. I definitely lost some money like everybody, but most of everything I love about Batman came from movies, shows, games. The Batman Arkham Asylum games, Batman the Animated Series show, the Justice League shows, Michael Keaton's 1989 Batman, and Christian Bale. That is what Batman was to me growing up. Who doesn't want to be Batman? Similarly, even Spider-Man and the Incredible Hulk, which Spider-Man I was picking up, it wasn't the comics that got me into Spider-Man. At that point still, the Tobey Maguire, when that movie first came out, I was very much on the younger, small, skinny side most of my life growing up. So I gravitated very much towards superheroes that were in one thing, weak, small, they didn't have the means to do what they thought needed to be done. And then through some change, they were able to become everything they wish they could be. For Spider-Man, this nerd who got bit by the spider, all of a sudden he had this power with responsibility. The Incredible Hulk, you have this small, nerdy scientist who becomes this giant, unstoppable rage monster. Those were the things that spoke to me as a kid, because I always wanted to be bigger, stronger, and more than I currently was. So I loved the toys, the action figures, but especially, again, the same thing with that 1989 Batman. The Tobey Maguire Spider-Man movies hold a special, near and dear place to my heart, specifically because that was what hardcore got me into Spider-Man growing up. Those movies are absolutely my childhood. I can go back and rewatch those as many times as I can count. On top of that, there's Spider-Man, the animated series from, I think it was the 90s that it came out. That also was a huge, heavy influence on everything I collect now. If we flash forward even further, as you guys have been seeing, a lot of the Justice League Unlimited first appearances that I've been picking up are very much, again, from shows, not comics I was reading. So even though I'm very much into comics now and I'm going back and catching up on reading, I'm catching up on characters, and the passion of what is coming through, hopefully in these videos, is from the movies, shows, games, action figures, and that spawns into comics. I'm not somebody that went from comics to the other media. Quite the opposite. It's the other media that got me into comics. And that is very much what the Marvel Cinematic Universe did for me. It has made me fall in love with so many characters that I did not know about, I did not care about, and now I'm trying to snag as many of those first appearances as I can also. Those, I'm kind of taking a back seat, because right now, again, there's still a little focus on it, but that is the power of what the movies can do. Comics, again, for people that grew up reading comics, to see that translated onto the big screen, I'm sure is just as magical, just as special. But especially for younger generations, I feel like we are more likely to get that broad net cast over and get new fans into the comic hobby through the movies and shows. And it's not enough to have a character just appear and pop up in a movie. That's not going to make it stick with somebody. A lot of the ones that people spec on this character might show up in this movie, they do, and so what? It's not going to make a fan of that character. That character appeared, that's really cool, but at the same time, it didn't mean anything. So people get a little overhyped on things like that. Whereas you do it just right, and you have the power to create an entire new fan base for an entire new character. And one of the more recent spectacular examples of this is with the Into the Spider-Verse movies. Before those movies came out, I had not read or seen a single thing Miles Morales Spider-Man related. And it is not because I hated the character. I wanted nothing to do with the character just because Peter Parker was my Spider-Man. Tobey Maguire was my Spider-Man. And then I heard the first movie was good, but again, it still wasn't for me. The trailer for the second movie came out, Across the Spider-Verse. And I know the first one gets props for how visually pleasing it was. This one, even more so, that when I saw the trailers, I had to go back and see what it was all about. So I went back, I watched Into the Spider-Verse. I was completely blown away. I fell in love with that movie. I saw the second one, and even more so, what they do with not just the visual storytelling, but the characters. That is the kind of thing that is going to create a whole new generation of fan that will want to go back and read the comics. Because it's not enough for a character to appear in any media. That character has to make you feel something. You have to resonate with that character. That's why a lot of great movies and shows that have good characters, if they're funny, they never really have deep moments, or they don't make you feel something personally, you might think it would be kind of cool to have it in the collection, but it's not going to become that hardcore fan favorite that changes and creates a whole new base of fans. That is what the Into the Spider-Verse movies did for me. I went from somebody that wanted nothing to do with those comics because Peter Parker was my Spider-Man, to watching how fleshed out of a character they did with Miles Morales made me want to go back, start reading some of his comics. I plan to get his first appearance because that is how much I love that character now. And I want to go back and get his first appearance, read the comics, specifically because of what those movies were able to make me feel. You actually feel his struggles, what he's going through, the challenges he's faced with, and what he has to rise above to become Spider-Man. And the second movie, when you have people like myself telling him to his face that he's not Spider-Man, he's not supposed to be Spider-Man, and what he does with that, how he rises above it. He's going to do his own thing. I really, really loved that. I very much am a person also that, in addition to wanting to be something more than I am, I grew up, thanks to my father, that when you're faced with a challenge, there isn't give up, there isn't no, that's not an option. You figure it out and you do it. And because of that, that has helped me a lot in life. Many of the things I've been able to accomplish are because of that mindset. So that kind of resonated with me when I watched Across the Spider-Verse. Miles had everything going for him, all the reasons to quit, everybody telling him it's not meant to be, he's a mistake. And the fact that he still pushed through, got stronger because of it, that has now made me a Miles Morales fan, hopefully for life. I want to see more. I would love to see him as much as I want my regular Peter Parker Spider-Man. I'm looking forward to Spider-Man 4 with Tom Holland. I would love to see what they do bringing the Miles Morales onto the live-action big screen. But that is what we need from comics. And that is why, short answer, just because the movies are bad, is that going to make you stop loving the comics that you already had and loved? It absolutely should not. If movies and shows are really, really good, and they're creating tons of new fans, is that going to make comics more valuable and price go up? Absolutely. Because now you have a huge fan base that wants to go back, read the comics, the stories, the first appearances, and not just the first appearances. If you saw a movie or a show that you know directly adapted a storyline from a beloved comic series, I'm more likely to go back and want to read that comic series to see, all right, was it as awesome as the movie or show did it? What did they change? I want to see and get more of that. It's almost like that addiction where you need more of that world, so you go back and you get it anywhere you can. And that is why, absolutely, I am excited for movies, I'm excited for shows. All of the comics I have around me are specifically because all of that other media that put me into comics. So I absolutely get the people that started out with comics and movies and shows they could care less about. But at least for myself, and I like to think a huge generation, it works the opposite way, where we have so many more people that are awesome in the hobby, fans, specifically because of what the movies have been able to do, and kind of recast that light back onto this hobby. So, again, that is my kind of long-winded example of why I believe that the movies and shows absolutely should play a role in how much comics are worth, what's valuable, what they mean to people, and in terms of creating new fans or not creating new fans. So, as always, collect what you love, and I completely get that trying to get ahead of the curve if you hear a character's coming out and you want to be able to get that appearance before everybody else does, but try to fight that FOMO. Things go up, but things will come down. As long as you're doing what you love, what you want to collect, you can't really lose, but fight the FOMO so you're still timing it smart. Alright, that's all we got for this video. So, again, a little long-winded, but thank anybody who actually sat through this entire video. Until next time.